And we are back with another episode of From the Rafters. Sam and I are here recording on a Wednesday before the Celtics are taking on the Dallas Mavericks. And we are here with former Celtics and NBA writer for the Boston Herald, Steve Bulpett. How you doing today, Steve?
Doing fine. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Thanks a whole lot
Thank
for
you.
coming on.
Yeah, we
No worries.
really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. So, first thing we want to talk about was obviously Celtics lose a tough game to the Pelicans the other night. Marcus Smart, seemingly everything blowing up in his face. What do you take from that Marcus Smart performance? I know a lot of people were talking about how it's one of the worst he's had as a Celtic. Do you think that's an over-exaggeration, or do you think that truly was just a really, really poor game for Marcus?
I mean, yeah, he screwed up a couple times really bad, but he also made some big plays. So, let's look at Jason Tatum. How great is Jason Tatum, right? But then there's times where he goes one-on-one when he shouldn't and the ball sticks in his hand. So, with everybody, there's good and bad. I'm not trying to say that Marcus Smart's as good as Jason Tatum, but, if you want what Marcus Smart gives you, you're going to have to take what Marcus Smart also brings on the other side sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Marcus, he's always been a little bit of a risk on the offensive end, right? But on the defensive end, he always brings you the grit and toughness. Unfortunately, he had the little mishap where he shot the ball from half court. But, it's just one for the blooper reel, I guess.
For sure, yeah. I mean, you get the give and take, like you said, Steven. I saw a tweet that you put out about the last 2-minute report and the NBA saying, oh, yeah, that should have been a foul on Marcus Smart, the one he was complaining about when he got ejected. What did you see in that play? Did you agree with that last 2-minute report that Smart should have been called for a foul against Steven Adams? Do you think Adams should have been called for a foul, or do you think no call was the right play there?
Well, if you look at it, first of all, referees in real time, I'm amazed that people don't understand what they're trying to do and what they have to see. It's like, sometimes it's like, okay, stand in a blender. We're going to put a bunch of ingredients in and spin it around, and you got to pick out the blueberries. But in real time, it probably looked like Marcus took a charge. But if you look at it on the video, he does grab, put his arm around Steven Adams, and that technically should be a foul on Marcus. But, Marcus, he makes those plays a lot. He's been, warned and fined by the league for flopping and all those things. And, again, it's he's trying to make a play, and if it had worked out, it would have been great for the Celtics. But they made it a no call. And again, if you go back and look at it, then, the video is available. Check it out. It technically is a foul on Marcus.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I was watching it at work at the news station, but I mean, I can absolutely see why he was so upset, even though, like you say, he did hook him. We've seen that call a couple times before, and they were saying on the broadcast that they drew up that play solely to have Marcus set a screen that he could potentially get run over. I think he missed out on getting a couple calls because of his reputation around the league as being a flopper. Whether he flops or not, I mean, he got run over a lot in that Pelicans game. He was on the floor a lot trying to guard Zion. Zion, just the way he plays, he just goes right through guys. So I'd imagine his frustration throughout the whole game of being on the floor, not getting calls. And then he had a couple soft calls the other way or not soft, but like they gave the flagrant to Tatum. And then I believe there was one on Marcus, which was probably more of a flagrant than the Tatum one. But I can see why he was frustrated for sure.
Yeah, just definitely overall just a tough game for Marcus Smart to deal with, obviously ending in that ejection. And another guy who had a a tough game in his Celtics debut, Evan Fournier, 0 for 10 from the field, 0 for 5 from deep. If tough's the way you want to put it, that's one way. Straight out bad might be another. What do you see from Fournier in that game? And are you worried moving forward, or do you think this is just, a blip on the radar?
I'm concerned that Evan Fournier will never make another shot again in the NBA. I think his career is over. I think, he's made his last bucket, and I hope it was a good one because that'll be it. And he'll be back in France within a year, or actually within a few months, and looking back on just an awful last chapter of his basketball life. I don't know where he can play again after this.
His last bucket was a good one. It was a game winner for Orlando, if I'm not mistaken, right, Jack?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. Yeah.
Guy comes into a game. It's his first one for a new team. He wants to do well. And the worst thing you can do offensively is having conscious thought. It's got to be instinct. And when all of a sudden you miss a couple and now you're thinking about your shot, offensively, a mind is a terrible thing. You want to have that stuff on the computer chip and just have it be by instinct and get into a groove, get into a zone, and, you start pressing, and there you have it. I think any basketball person could look at that game and just feel bad, feel awful for Evan Fournier.
Yeah, I felt it too, because he wants to do well. He's excited. It's the first game where there's fans in the Garden. Obviously, it's his debut, and there's all the myth, lore, whatever you want to call it, about Celtics fans being such great fans, and they end up booing him by the end of the night. It's just it's a brutal debut story for him, but I'm sure he'll bounce back. Obviously, Brad Stevens said that he had confidence in him to bounce back. He said he's going to score a lot of buckets for the Celtics. So I'm excited to see how he responds against the Mavericks later on.
For sure, yeah, especially with Brown being out in that game against the Pelicans. Hopefully Brown gets a chance to play tonight against the Mavs. But talking about new guys, we mentioned Evan Fournier. Let's talk about another guy who's stolen the hearts of Boston fans already. Luke Cornett comes in as a throw-in piece in that Daniel Theis trade, has a huge game against the Thunder, has another decent game against the Pelicans. Looking at the Celtics center rotation, I'm not saying Luke Cornett's going to come in and start. He's a nice bench piece, but what do you see with Luke Cornett and with the Celtics center rotation as a whole, with Tristan Thompson coming back hopefully soon?
Well, he checks some of the key boxes that Brad Stevens is looking for in the offense that the Celtics run. Just the same way you wouldn't use a small sample size to indict Evan Fournier, you wouldn't use a small sample size to send Luke Cornett to Springfield. Look, when the deal happened, the general idea was that he was probably never going to play. He was going to get waived. But it's an opportunity league, and we'll see what happens from here. The longest journey begins with one step. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I know I remember Luke Cornett with his days with the Knicks. He was okay, but hopefully he can, notch himself a nice little role in the Celtics. But worst case comes to worst, he's gone after the season, and it's a nice little story for this year. But talking about that trade as a whole, obviously it was made for the purpose of getting under the luxury tax. How do you feel about it? Do you was it completely necessary in your eyes? What are your thoughts on the Theis trade as a whole that obviously saw Javonte Green go to Chicago as well?
Well, yeah, they were. It was a move for the cap. You want to avoid the repeater tax, which is where that's something that can really hinder your ability to make moves. But it was also clearing time for Rob Williams, and they had to look at it and say, as good as Daniel Theis has been, and I think he's played really good ball, and he's just been that kind of guy that you're really happy for a guy like Daniel Theis' success, because whereas a lot of guys, when someone large is bearing down on them preparing to dunk, a lot of guys will exit stage left and try to avoid the poster. Daniel Theis never had a problem sticking his nose in there. So again, just a real good guy and a real good player. But you had to wonder, how far were you going to get with Daniel Theis? Defensively, was he going to be able to do the things you needed? So, yeah. And the other part that's, we're leaving out here too is when the summer comes, what are your odds of being able to re-sign Daniel Theis? Are you going to be able to pay what he's going to be worth on the open market? So, it was a move that was kind of out of the blue a little bit, but that's understandable. I think the Fournier move is, you could have more questions with that on, spending a chunk of the traded player exception on a guy that's going to be a free agent after the season.
It's a good point at the end about the Fournier thing, where we all really don't think about that. The first thing I thought, I was like, wow, that's like free. I mean, I knew he was expiring, but I was really pumped. I hate trades. I hate talking trades because I hate giving things up. And Daniel Theis was something I didn't particularly want to give up. I'm okay with it. I think they got an all right return, but he had been playing really good ball for the last couple of years, especially stepping into the starting role after Horford left. And I was sad to see him go. He had a good debut for the Bulls. And as you tweeted out, it killed me. The war on Theis has come to an end, right, Steve? They didn't even call any fouls on him through his first game.
I don't know. I think the officials may get together on a conference call and say, yeah, by the way, Daniel Theis, the guy for Chicago, that's him. I don't think they recognize him without a Celtics uniform.
They weren't ready yet.
Look, I think, like I said, referee talk to me is just it's a bunch of BS. And people that complain about calls, it's like, if you knew these guys, if you knew the referees, the idea that they're playing favorites, that this and that is just ludicrous. But I will say that I have seen games where Daniel Theis has walked out from the bench to the center circle for the opening tip, and he already has 2 fouls.
Absolutely brutal. The war on Theis, I mean, who knows if it'll continue in Chicago. Maybe you're right, Steve. They need to get hip to the New Jersey colors he's wearing, the red and black instead of the green and white. But I agree with your sentiment about the foul thing. I mean, we saw a couple games ago the Celtics just continuously not get back on defense after complaining on foul calls. And it gets annoying after a while because you got to get used to it. Jason Tatum talked about it post-game. He said, you just got to get right through it and you got to keep playing. We can't let it get in our heads, everything like that. And Kemba Walker was probably one of the main guys who was doing it. And that reminded me, I wanted your thoughts on Kemba's season so far. Obviously, there are these rumors going on that, he might get traded in the offseason. Danny tried to trade him last offseason. Where do you see Kemba's future with the team being at right now? And then how do you like his play so far this season?
Well, I think as far as the future goes, you got to let this year play out and see what happens. As far as this year with him, when he came back from being out so long, he had some up and down games. But the last couple of games, he's played really well. And I don't think there's any coincidence that he's playing better and the Celtics are playing with much more pace. They're pushing the ball a lot more. I don't think that's an accident. I've been, talking to friends and other people and basketball people about that the last few days. The Celtics are definitely been playing with more pace the last couple, and that is a style that certainly suits everybody on that team, whether they want to realize it or not. But it certainly suits Kemba. So, I'm willing to say to let things play out and see how things work out with him. But as always, if you can find a good move, you make it.
Yeah, I love the pace. I completely agree with you. The Celtics are absolutely at their best when they're out running because that's where the easiest buckets are. It's usually an easy layup unless, the Fournier miss. At least Pritchard was with him on that break. But going back to the referees, I didn't get to jab in with Jack. I agree with that too. I really hate when the guys complain about the refs. Tatum, I was surprised he was the one talking about it. He's usually always got his arms up in the air, and I always get frustrated when he will complain. But they got to get through it because even if the refs are bad, we can complain all we want. They still didn't play a complete game. You can knock Fournier for being 0 of 10. That's definitely something that will improve and should have improved in that game. Would have gave him a better shot to win. Marcus Smart missed a lot of shots, unfortunately. there's always room for improvement despite the officials. And I think the players need to realize that, including Kemba, who's had a brutal whistle this season.
Well, and you look at, here's one thing you can say about officiating and just basketball in general. The whistle generally favors the more aggressive team. And you look at when the Celtics make their runs, they extend their defense. They're playing, they're not just reaching, but they're moving their feet. And that gets you a better whistle. The referees, if you're reaching, that's like a signal right there. And the Celtics in the game the other night, what happened, like third quarter, all of a sudden the defensive intensity goes away, and you're like they're playing like sitting ducks. You have to be, look, the offensive player should always have an advantage because he knows where he's going to go before the defensive player knows where he's going to go. So you have to be more aggressive before the play is initiated to prevent the player from perhaps going where he wants to go. And when that kind of intensity goes away, now you've got a guy that can get a step on his man, and you get into rotations. And how many times this season, you saw it a ton in the last game, where the rotation, a guy's helping out because someone's gotten beat by a half a step. There's a pass out to the wing for an open three, and that's where the Celtics are getting killed. So, you got to play your man head up better so that you don't require help. And that means you have to play aggressively, assertively. And, these are just basic basketball principles that are never going to go away. And look, the Celtics can bitch all they want about calls and this and that, but they've, blown themselves out of the playoffs they've eliminated themselves the last 3 years by playing hero ball. And that doesn't go to roster, it doesn't go to depth, it doesn't go to referees' calls, it certainly doesn't go to coaching. But they've, instead of running the play or running the offense and just moving the ball and cutting, they've said, okay, you've got guys saying, well, I'll take responsibility, I'll go make a play. Well, that's really admirable of you, but you've taken the team out of what you want to do. And now the defense can collapse far more easily, and, the game just kind of blows up on you.
Now, you mentioned the hero ball, and Jack and I both agree. We were looking at each other on the call, nodding our heads. Absolutely nailed it. Do you think that's on Brad Stevens? A lot of people tend to think that way. I don't think Jack and I believe that at all, but he gets a lot of criticism. How much of it do you think is fair?
Does anyone honestly think that Brad Stevens is telling guys, keep dribbling, and if there's like another defender comes over, dribble some more, and if a third defender comes, dribble a little bit more, then take a fall away.
It's the Patriots fans. They come in.
I don't get how anyone, if you listen to Brad, he's always talking about the need to make sure the ball doesn't stick, to make sure the ball is popping around. That's basic basketball. And, I've been saying this for the last few months in different spots here, that if you're a player and you're being told, your coach is telling you something that he wants you to do, and you know that what he's telling you is not only good for the team, but it's also good for you and your own self-interest in the long run, and you still don't do it, well, who's the issue here? Is it the coach or is it the player? The offense is tough, and guys that can make tough shots, well, that's cool, but you really want to make easier shots. And if the ball is moving, you're giving the defense a chance to mess up and miss a rotation the same way we were talking about the Celtics a moment ago, right? And how much better would Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and all these guys be as finishers, like catch the ball and be able to just finish without having to put it on the floor? You saw last game, I think Tatum had a really good pocket lay-down pass for a dunk, This stuff is basic basketball 101, and I don't get it. And look, I get it, the guys are young and all these different things, and they're trying to establish themselves. But when what's the definition of insanity is repeating the same behavior and expecting different results.
Yeah, that I like the point about the finishing, and I think that is why the fans and everyone is clamoring for more Robert Williams, because that's all he does is finish. He's not having to create shots. He goes up and gets the ball and finishes. And I think Jaylen Brown.
He's also good with passes too.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times he made a real nice pass to the Tatum last game, cutting. That's the thing is, that kind of basketball feeds on itself and grows. But if you're cutting and you're not seeing the ball, how much more willing are you going to be to cut the next time? And that's the game. You cut, you take someone with you, that opens up a space. And that's where space gets created. But even if you're just moving the ball around the perimeter, what's the value necessarily? You've got to get guys moving and cutting. And, how many times have you seen, and Theis was really good at this, and you saw it from Rob Williams last game a couple times. A guy like Tatum drives to the basket, you score. You go, wow, what a great play by Tatum, drove and scored. Now, he didn't make the play. It was Theis sealing the defender that made the play. He's the guy that should get credit for the bucket because he held his position and sealed the defender. And that's winning basketball.
Yeah, and you mentioned winning basketball, and you talked about, obviously the Celtics shooting themselves out of the playoffs last season, but I feel like the biggest difference from those season to this season is just the very clear steep drop-off in the defensive abilities of the team, including offense, too. Offense has been rough this year, but when you look at the way the team's constructed, right, it's a matter of a lack of Gordon Hayward, and then you lose, obviously, Cantor and Wanamaker, too, but that shouldn't account for this steep of a drop-off in play. And it's never fun to play the game, and it's not easy to play the blame game either. But what aspects of the Celtics game this year do you think are so much different than last year, where the drop-off in record and just ability to finish games is so different than in years prior?
Well, I think it hurt them not having Kemba from the start of the season, because Kemba's a guy that is a very good teammate, not a good teammate, a very good teammate. And he's a guy that gets people together. But they've not had the kind of cohesiveness. And I just think it's getting it through their heads that for all their talent, it's useless unless you play aggressive defense. And that'll feed into what you want individually, because tough defense leads to opportunity basket. You create turnovers, you go the other way with numbers, opportunity baskets, you score easily, and life is good. And look, when you're playing that kind of defense and you're playing passing, cutting offense, the ball's going to find energy. And, that puts you in the zone you want to be in as a team. It just, there's so many examples of what you need to do. And for all the issues you can say, look, and I said before the season that as much as Gordon Hayward was in a difficult situation here, that ball movement and cutting were probably the biggest problem with this team, and it getting eliminated last year and even the year before that, and certainly the year before that when they lost in Game 7 at home to Cleveland. But Gordon Hayward was a guy that you could count on to play the right way, to move the basketball, to pass and cut. And it was going to be difficult. You were going to miss what he brought you. But with all that said, it is certainly within the capabilities of the players who remain to play that way, to move the ball, to cut. And again, the rewards are great. Team-wise, individual-wise, you'll get your numbers and you'll be shooting a higher percentage because you'll be taking better shots. I mean, Utah's a very good basketball team, but their shooters, the percentage that those guys shoot from three is greatly enhanced by the way they move the basketball, by the way they give it up unselfishly. And that's why Utah shoots so well. You can't just say, well, the Celtics don't have shooters that are that good. Well, give the guys that are in the Celtics, give them open shots in rhythm, into out, squared up, and then look at their shooting percentage.
Yeah, I think the shooters on the Celtics aren't that bad. I mean, we see a lot of inconsistency from certain guys, like Shemi. Shemi's someone that, like, he'll have a game where he scores 20 points, then he can't get a basket. Grant Williams is a guy that, for some reason, I believe every time he shoots the ball, it's going to go in. I think I have false confidence in Grant for some reason. And then, obviously, Brown, Tatum, Kemba. Marcus can be a good 7 for 9 against Milwaukee on Friday, I believe. I mean, he is someone that is a streaky guy as well. So they have the capabilities to do that.
What kind of shots is he getting? That's what you got to look at.
Right.
If he's coming down and he's flinging it up, that's one thing. But is he getting shots where he's squared up in the perimeter, someone's getting a penetration to the paint, and then passing it out to a squared up Marcus? There's nothing wrong with his mechanics. You certainly see it at the free throw line. Nothing wrong with his mechanics.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to this second half of the season, if you will, because they did bring in more quote-unquote shooters despite having guys around the team. Like we already talked about Cornette. Mo Wagner is a guy that can shoot. He made his first shot as a Celtic from the same spot that Theis missed his last. Obviously Fournier. So they really have less excuses in that department. I think they got some solid depth out of those trades. It's not the best depth, but I'm excited to see how they are able to improve, if at all. What do you think the capabilities of this team are? Because from what we've discussed today, we all seem to believe that there's a lot that they're not doing correctly, and if they iron it out, they should be a good team.
I think that if they got their stuff together, I think they could be competitive with just about anybody. But the way I look at, saying where do teams fit, the way I judge that for right or wrong is you look at a team, you look at its roster and say, if they played to their maximum capability, and both teams in that game and series played to their maximum capability, who would win? Now, if you look at individual player talents, and no one can touch Brooklyn,
right?
But I want to see Brooklyn with Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden on the floor together, and I want to see how that works, not only from a basketball point of view, but I want to see the sociological and psychological study of that one. I want to see where the ball goes and how guys, how willing guys are to sacrifice and play for the greater good at times, or will other instincts kick in? But if you look at it, Kyrie Irving, Durant, James Harden, in terms of pure basketball talent, there's certainly 3 of the top 10 in the league, right? I mean, Kyrie, for all his whatever, is an incredibly gifted basketball player. My God, that guy is good.
Right.
And, Harden shows what he can do. And as good as Kyrie and Harden are, Durant may be even greater. So that's kind of hard to fathom all that talent in one situation.
Yeah, I mean, it really might be the most purely, like you said, basketball talented trio the league has seen, which is scary, but you do need to see them on the floor. And don't get me started, bro. I mean, 35-year-old LaMarcus Aldridge is going to come in, average 30 a game with the way he's being hyped up by the media. So you can't sleep on him either. And then Blake Griffin too. So they've got some really elite all-star talent.
Do you have a problem with the buyout, Steve? Because we've been talking a lot about this lately, about the buyout market and how guys are. I don't know if you want to call it quitting on teams, but they just they're giving up and then they go and join a contender. Is there a problem with that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be looking so much to illustrate your point. I think I'd be looking more at what happened with what James Harden did with Houston than the buyout market per se. But, look, in terms of Aldridge, I don't think he just laid down and said, I want to get myself out of here. I think the Spurs looked at the situation and said, here we are as a basketball team. How far can we go right now? What's in our way? Is LaMarcus Aldridge going to be here when we have a chance to be good again? And I think that's just basically teams. You have to look at the situation and make those kind of judgments, because it's not just about gathering as many good players as you can and rolling the ball out and let's go play. You have to factor in cap situations and, roster spots and development. Look, it does, how teams approach things. And I guess I'm kind of reaching back for this example, but to me, one of the best moves Danny Ainge has ever made in this job is in the summer of 2007, when it was, sure, he brings in Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, but I thought one of the key things he did that summer was not go out and get a veteran point guard like Doc Rivers wanted. Danny Ainge forced Doc Rivers to play Rajon Rondo. And, I think there might be a little some of that now with, I'm a Jeff Teague believer. So, but I think that Danny moving on from Teague, yeah, it was roster spot and this and that, but I think he was kind of forcing Brad to play Peyton Pritchett more. Not that Brad had a real problem with that, but as well as Teague had played the last couple of games, anyway, I think, to get to your point again, it does feel weird when guys get buyouts and then kind of go join a wagon. But hey, the Celtics have benefited from that in the past. Maybe not to the degree of like an all-star player, but do the Celtics win in 2008 if PJ Brown doesn't get bought out and come to the Celtics?
Right. He had a big shot against Cleveland in Game 7 for sure. Two other young guys, you mentioned Pritchard, Nesmith and Langford. Langford more specifically will be coming back into the lineup somewhat soon. He's questionable for tonight's game. What are your expectations for the two of those guys?
Well, I mean, it's you got to see. We're not in at practices, so we don't know, a lot of stuff. So you kind of have to judge by what limited view you've had on guys. So, Nesmith, from what I've seen so far this year, he's kind of intriguing. But, could he be playing more earlier on? I kind of think so. But again, we're not there at practice inside and seeing how he's doing in those situations. But could Aaron Nesmith be Duncan Robinson? There was a guy that Miami gave him the ball and said, "Go ahead, fire away." Because if I look at one thing that may be making you a little bit uneasy right now about Aaron Nesmith is, he comes into games and he's trying to be a shooter, but first of all, is he getting good shots? And that's goes back to the discussion about the offense. But, you want to see him be able to develop that kind of confidence and that kind of rhythm and just instinct. So he's a guy that he certainly intrigues me. And the limited view we've had of Romeo Langford, he's a guy that just kind of got a scoring knack. So, I don't expect a whole lot because he's coming back from injury, and then he gets the setback of COVID, and we still don't know how that's going to affect him. It certainly affected Jason Tatum when he came back. So, I guess, you don't want to answer a question with a question, but I've still got huge, I think those are open questions about how those guys fit now and going forward.
For sure, yeah. I'm definitely intrigued at Romeo Langford. We obviously haven't seen much of him in the past year, but a lot of people are saying he could be an important piece to the Celtics rotation. So I'm looking forward to him entering it once again. I mean, he's a myth at this point, so I guess we'll see. But I know, Sam, you had a couple things you wanted to mention before we wrap up this interview. Thank you, Steve, again for joining us. But Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, every time we have a first-time guest on the show, I run through a couple of, I guess, fan-based questions, different things about your Celtics fandom. Whether or not you grew up as a fan, you've covered the team for 10 years, so I have a few questions. Do you have a favorite piece? You covered them for 10 years for the Herald, right?
You're a little short, but that's okay.
Enlighten me, please. I'm so sorry.
Since 1985.
Yeah, so you have your fair share of experience with the team.
35 years.
I'm so sorry.
You cut his ears in a third. Oh no.
I'm sorry.
I actually played in the Old Garden. I played a high school game in the Old Garden.
Did you?
Yes.
That's so awesome. I'm not upset, but I wish I got to experience the Old Garden. I was born in '98, not to make you feel old, but we
I don't feel old, dude. I just did 4 miles and I'm feeling great. So
that's great.
It's more than I can run. So.
So 2 things. Number 1, ask your question. Number 2, get off my lawn.
Okay. So number 1, do you have a favorite piece of Celtics memorabilia that you keep around? Maybe something like a ticket stub, autograph. I know you cover the team, so those things might not be as, on a pedestal as for a fan. But at the same time, do you have any interesting pieces like that?
Well, first of all, I grew up a Celtic fan. I grew up in the area. But when you're covering a team, you're not a fan of the team if you're doing your job properly. If you're going to trust the junk I'm writing, you have to believe and understand, and I have to prove it to you that it's not coming from an angle of, gosh, gee whiz, I really want this team to win. I'm not rooting for anybody. When you're covering a team, you're rooting for no overtime. You want to make your deadlines and all that stuff. And you want to see good basketball. It's a job and it's a business. And I consider myself more of a basketball person than a media person. You can probably tell that by how I kind of nerd out on, discussing X's and O's and what the right way to play is. But I've got one weird piece of I guess, memorabilia, though it wasn't intended to stay in my possession. In 1993, Kevin McHale, the Celtics got eliminated by Charlotte, and Kevin McHale afterwards announced his retirement. He basically, we kind of knew it was coming. And so I was there as a columnist that night for the Herald. And so my column was on, the end of Kevin's career. So we had talked to him courtside, and then he had another interview session in the dressing room. And so we finished up, and he said, that's it. That's the last act of my Celtic career. And then he said, no, wait a minute, this is. And he reaches down, grabs this ankle brace that he's been wearing because he had played on the broken foot in the '87 playoffs, and that changed a lot of Celtic trajectory there. And if you go back, it's kind of amazing how you can piece things together. But he gets up, picks up the brace, stands up and throws it into the corner of the dressing room and says, "That's my last act as a Celtic." And so I go out of the dressing room, I go write my column, and I'm finished up, and I start thinking about that brace, and I'm waiting for a couple of those writers to finish so we can head back to the hotel. And I take a walk back to the dressing room, and they haven't come in to clean up yet. And I walk over to the corner to see if that brace is still there. So I went over, and it was there, and I picked it up, and I was gonna. First of all, I offered it back to Kevin, and actually I offered it back to him. We were talking a couple of weeks ago, and I offered it back to him again, and he wants no part of it. But at that time, we're talking '93, and it's still a big deal. I was gonna give it to a charity to auction off, for a weird memorabilia item, right. And that never worked out. And then years later, I realized I still have this thing. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That might be the best story that we've gotten about a piece of memorabilia.
The other kind of memorabilia I have, a piece of memorabilia that's, well, it's kind of more important in a personal sense. Again, I'm not, I've got a bunch of old press passes somewhere, but who gives a whoop? There was a guy, Frank Hamblin, and he was an assistant coach for a bunch of teams, and most recently the Lakers. And actually, he passed away a couple of years ago. It was a really close friend of mine from Terre Haute, Indiana. Played at Syracuse and had been an assistant for the Kings and the Bucks and a bunch of teams. Anyway, he got to the Bulls as an assistant for Phil Jackson, and in his first year with the Bulls, they won a championship. And so I'm out there, covering the series, and they win the title. I bang out my column and make that line, and I say, "Hell, I'm going to go to the Bulls dressing room and see if Frank is still there, and congratulate my friend,
Right.
And I go in, and there's like a little coach's office, and Phil is there and a couple of people, and Frank goes, "Come on in." He said, "Grab a cup," and he pours me some champagne into this plastic cup from me at the United Center. And we're hanging out, and I'm just so happy for him because he's been a basketball lifer, and now he's a champion. And so we talked for a while, and I'm just, again, really happy for him. I'm walking. I got to go back and, get on the media bus, one of the media buses, and head back to the hotel. And I walk out of the dressing room, walk onto the floor, and I'm walking diagonally across the court to the media area. And I finish up the champagne thing, and there's a bunch of confetti that they dropped. And I grab a few handfuls of it, put it in the cup, and took a box score from the game and jammed it so it would stay in there. And I still have that. And when the Celtics lost to the Lakers in Game 7 in 2010, I did the same thing. Saw Frank in the dressing room afterwards and grabbed a bunch of confetti, the purple and gold thing, and put a box score. And that was, my friend's first championship and then one of his last. So that's kind of more personal, but kind of a long story. And I apologize for dragging on with it.
No, we love stories.
That's amazing. That's like so unique too, like the confetti and the champagne cup and everything. That's awesome. Wow.
It was kind of funny. In 2010, the Celtics lose Game 7, a game they never should have lost to the Lakers. And I was staying out in the Marina Del Rey, and driving back, and I'm thinking, there's no way Frank, hung around the victory party and stuff. And I veered off on the way to the Marina and went to Playa del Rey. There's a little dive bar there that Frank would hang out at, and sometimes Phil would stop in as well, Phil Jackson. But anyway, I walk in, and there's Frank. And we had a good discussion about the game, and I I took some of the confetti. I put some in my pocket and I dropped it over his head too. So
that's awesome. Wow.
How did you guys become good friends? Just from you covering, basketball throughout the years?
Yeah. The NBA used to have league meetings every year that combined everything. And it was always like in September before the season would start, and they'd have it at some resort, someplace, in the U.S., continental U.S. and stuff. And the first one I went to was in '86 in Orlando, Orlando, the Grand Cypress area there. And, just one hotel, and, they'd have a bunch of meetings, and they'd have like broadcast meetings and competition committee stuff and PR meetings and different things, but there'd be media there because there were things to cover. And by the way, all the coaches were there and GMs. So, the relationships you built at the hotel bar, so I met Frank then, and we just, hit it off because we've kind of both got a little strange senses of humor. And, just we said became friends over the years. And, it's still, his passing still kills me. But a really, really good guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow.
Yeah. See, you just hit us with two of the best memorabilia stories. And the friendship is better than memorabilia. I mean, you knocked it out of the park.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny. Now Kobe was great over the years. Kobe was very good to the Boston Herald. I'll say that. But when Phil Jackson first got to the Lakers, he was trying to get Kobe he was trying to institute the triangle offense. And anyway, I'd gone out early for a Celtics game, and Frank Hamblin and I met up at this. I don't think it's even there anymore, in the Marina, Jerry's Deli. And after the game, and it was like I think it was a 24-hour place or something. Anyway, I remember asking him, about how much of the time is Kobe running your stuff, stuff you want him to run. And I think Frank said he's running it about half the time. He goes, and what's interesting is when he's not running it, the way that the triangle's set up, he not only has to beat his man, but he has to beat our guy who's in the way of him. And he's still doing that too. So that's how good Kobe was.
Classic. It sounds like Kobe from everything, everyone tells about him.
A lot of people always have good things to say about him when we, ask about interviews and things like that with different media members. He sounded like he was like a really good guy to talk to. He understood everybody's job and he gave good answers, always respectful.
Yeah, and you had to understand Kobe too. And I remember it was he played in the rookie All-Star game, the rookie sophomore game, whatever, was in Cleveland one year, and I remember he's playing in this game and he's firing up, and Mark Heisler from the LA Times, after one particularly Kobe-ish play, turns to me and says, "That's Kobe in a nutshell, talented, nuts." But he's a guy that understood things. And, I remember it was at one of the last times I did a private sit down with him. He was injured. He was out injured. And I saw him in a game, and I said, I'd gone in early. I said, "I need to talk to you." And he said, well, because I haven't been talking to media now because I've been out injured. He goes, "Come to practice tomorrow. And when they let the media in, go to the back hallway, And so I did. And then he actually, that was the interview where he sat down and opened up to me about how much he really, really loved Boston and how much he loved the fans. He loved the passion, and, he loved beating the Celtics. But, he just, how much he really loved the city and all those things. And he talked about how when they lost the championship in 2008, how the Garden, they kept playing the Dropkick Murphys song, Shipping Up to Boston. And that next summer, he told me that he had played that song during his workouts just to piss himself off and motivate him. And
sounds about right.
I had tried. I'd also gotten to know Ken Casey, the singer from Dropkick Murphys, and I had tried so hard to get them on a phone together, and we tried a couple times, but we just kept missing that. And I really wanted to do it and put it on the phone, on speakerphone, because I wanted to record that puppy and tell that story. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, Kobe. I'm not sure how he got down this rabbit hole, but I really would have been interested to see what Kobe's next chapters would have been. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they would have been really interesting. He wouldn't have just faded into the sunset. There was a guy that was driven to do wild stuff, pretty great stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
The next question we always get into, it's hard to follow up Kobe with anything, but I'm sure you have some great moments that you've been at. You covered the team for more than 10 years. News to me. I'm, again, sorry about that. But, you've seen it all. So do you have a favorite moment that you've got to, be at the Garden for? Maybe not a championship because those are easy. But a lot of people will say, my particular favorite was probably I got to go to Paul Pierce Day, his last game at the Garden. That was pretty awesome. So anything along those lines and why?
Let's see. Should we talk about Celtic moments?
Could be anything.
Here's a weird one. A couple of weird ones. In '86, they had the first 3-point contest. I've been telling this story a couple of times recently. In '86, they have that first 3-point contest, and Larry Bird wins it. And so back then the team was flying commercial, and guys with the All-Star flying commercial from Dallas to the first game was in Sacramento afterwards. So Monday morning, the Celtic people that were involved in the game were on commercial flight from Dallas to San Francisco to Sacramento, and the flight from Sacramento to San Francisco to Sacramento, I think the flight was like 3 minutes. I think we dusted some crops along the way. It's a really short distance. Anyway, get to Sacramento, and they were staying at the Red Lion Inn, this kind of a motelish hotel kind of thing. And the team is gathering to get on the bus to go to practice on that Monday night. And Bird is standing by the door of the bus. He's got one of those little dime store notebooks, and he had bet like everybody. We're talking just a few dollars here and there. And he's standing there going, "Hey, I got you down here. Come on, get up the money here. I'm the 3-point king. You told me I wasn't going to win it. I told you I was going to be the 3-point king. Go get your money." "Oh, come on, Larry. It's in my room. It's miles away." They'll wait for you. They ain't going to leave without me. I'm the 3-point king. Go get your money. Come on. He had the dime store notebook, and he's taking these checking guys off. So that tells you not only, of course, we all know how great a player he was, but he was that kind of competitor too. And that was huge. If I can give you more than one moment, is that okay?
Of course. Give as many as you want.
Yeah. Well, there was the moment where Shaq came over, and the whole story about Paul Pierce getting the Truth nickname. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
yep,
that was kind of weird. But are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Remember the Celtics season where they won like 15 games?
Which one? Not in the 90s, right? In the 2000s.
Yeah.
The one before the big three? Like right before?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and well, I think ML was coaching, and anyway, the Celtics would come out of the dressing room and they would meet in the hallway and the players would have like a quick huddle, and then like 1, 2, 3 Celtics and go out to the game. And at that point in the pregame, that hallway is kind of cordoned off from media. Like you're able to go through there back and forth before that, but then a couple minutes before, they really don't want anyone else in there. And I had been talking to someone down the end of the hallway and in a little alcove there, and when I finished, I poked my head out, and all of a sudden there's the Celtic players in the middle. And it's usually someone will say something. This is before the last game of that season. Excuse me. And usually someone will say, something inspirational like, "Well, we got to go get them tonight," and 1, 2, 3 Celtics, and they run onto the court. Well, the guys get into that little huddle, and there's like a kind of an awkward pause of silence, and a voice in the middle. And I've confirmed with him later, it was Rick Fox. Just paused and said, "Let's get this fucking thing over with." And they ran out.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Weird.
I mean, yeah. If I won that many games in a season,
it's gonna be like really take a toll on them to go out and lose all the time. It's gotta be tough for some guys. Yeah. I mean, they are getting paid quite a bit, so can't be the worst.
Yeah, for sure.
And then one more thing I'll ask, and then we'll let you get up out of here. Do you have a favorite story that you got to cover? Any column that you wrote that sticks out in particular?
Well, the thing about when Shaq, kind of, the beginning of the Paul Pierce Truth nickname was a weird story. Well, interesting story. But honestly, like I'm under no illusion that this job is has any great importance to anyone. You know what I mean? In terms of, you can look at pretty much every other job in the world is more important in the overall grand scheme of things than what, I tell you the basketball score, big whoop. But it's not often that you get to do something you think might help somebody, and there were a couple times that happened. I said, okay, something, I didn't just tell you the score today. And there was once where they had a Celtic road trip was ending, a West Coast trip was ending in Denver. And so you have to do your stuff that night, but then you have to grab an extra story that you can write the next day for the following day's paper. And so I pulled aside Danny Fortson, if you remember him. And, he'd been starting to play a little bit better. And I said, Rick Pitino said, that, if you get better with the plays, he's going to play you more. And he said, well, it's a little bit tough. And he's a guy I developed a little bit of a relationship with because he'd gone to the University of Cincinnati and I'd gone to Dayton, and we'd kind of busted each other's chops about that little rivalry back when it was one. And he said, well, it's been a little bit difficult for me because I don't learn the same way that other guys do because I've got dyslexia. And there's like a pause. And back then, like we've come to the point now where people understand what dyslexia is and what it isn't now. But back then it was still had kind of a stigma to it, People didn't quite understand it in the general sense. The general public didn't understand it quite that way. And I paused, said, Danny, do you want to tell me this? Do we want to talk about this? Because you don't want to put a guy in a bad position with something personal like that.
Right.
And he paused, looked at me, and said, yeah, let's talk about this. So we go in and we talk about the whole thing. Now I finished my stuff for that night. Now the next day I've got to write this story, but it's incumbent upon me to make sure that people know that this is, this does not mean that Danny Fortson's a dumb person. It means he's got this learning issue that a lot of people have. And again, this was back before internet, so I remember calling my paper the next day before I got on the flight, and I ended up working it out with the editor on duty that day that, hey, look, I gotta, I want control over the headline of this story, which writers don't, but I said, it's a sensitive story. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. I'm not gonna write it. And he said, well, if it's important to you, go ahead. And, he granted that. And then I couldn't figure out how to get into the story, how to start it. And then I called back a while later and said, look, I need you to go to the paper's library, the morgue, and search and find out, get me a list of famous people who've had dyslexia. And so he did. And so I was able to write the story. And the lead was something like Danny Fortson has something in common with, I don't know, I don't remember the people, like Einstein, Picasso, Bing Bing, all these, whatever, period. Next paragraph, he has dyslexia, period. Next paragraph. And I was able to, take this, any, stupid stigma off it, stupid in the sense that someone else might look at it improperly, and write the story. And, so if there was a kid whose parents might have read the story, or the kid might have read the story, and, his parents could tell him, hey, look, here's this big tough guy who's playing in the NBA, and he's got dyslexia too. And so, you don't need to feel like you're, to the child, you don't need to feel like you're isolated or, here's all these famous people have it, and this big tough guy with muscles has it, and look at him. And so maybe, life could be a little bit easier for someone like that, And if I can, God, I wanted this to be a brief thing, and now we're going on and on, but can I tell you one more quick one?
No.
Please,
we're fine.
Please.
We just don't want to hold you up. If you want to stay and chat, we got you.
I've got to go. I still got to go to the gym.
After your 4 miles? Oh, wow. I'm impressed.
It's a little difficult. Weight work is difficult. It's hard for me to go in and, take crap from inanimate objects, but I will do it. Tough when metal is laughing at you. Remember when Magic Johnson, he had the whole HIV thing,
right? Yeah.
And then he made a comeback. He was playing, right? And so the Celtics were out in LA to play the Clippers, and this is to tell you how long ago it was. I realized I would have a chance to get from the Celtic practice over to a Laker practice. They were in town and they were practicing over at the Forum. Again, we're talking way back. And there had been a story in the paper, in the Herald, about that someone on a news site had talked to high school kids. And back then, HIV/AIDS was still a major issue. It still is, but we appear to have found ways to deal with it somewhat. But this person was talking to high school kids that were saying, hey, this isn't a big deal. Look at Magic. Magic, he's back playing, and and look, he's even heavy, because back then people thought, well, you just kind of wither away and die. So right. I kind of wanted to. I thought about this with Magic, So I had the paper fax me that story. I said, I think I can make it over to the Laker practice, and in case I can you fax me that story? So I go into the Forum, and Laker practice finishes, and Magic looks over and laughs. What are you doing here? I go, I need to talk to you, I think. And he said, okay. So we were sitting in the stands at the Forum, and I said, I showed him this story. I go, this kind of scares me, because basically it means that kids could, were engaging in, risky behavior, and they were pointing to him as a reason why it's okay. And I said, this kind of scares me. You want to talk about this? What do you think about this? And Magic, looked at it, and he basically, okay, let's talk. And he said, and he proceeded to just really give it up. He said, because at the time, the circumstances looked different. He said, I made, mistakes and this and that. He goes, I'm not going to be I'm going to die before I'm supposed to. I'm not going to be able to see things with my kids that I'm supposed to see because of this. And no one should think, and I have access to the best treatments and the best doctors that other people don't have. So people shouldn't look at me and think, that they can, not be careful. People still need to be careful, especially kids. You still got to be very, very careful. So, I mean, that was something that may have, kept someone from doing something that could have endangered themselves. So that was 2 days out of 35 something years that I didn't feel like a total waste of oxygen,
No, yeah, I mean, both of those stories were amazing. Probably some of the best we've heard. We always love when guests come on and tell us cool stories. I mean, like I said, these are great. And please, if you ever have any more, don't feel like you're keeping us up. We love listening, so we really appreciate it. But with that, we'll as you said, get off your lawn. We'll let you go get your gym workout in. We really appreciate you coming on the show though today, Steve.
For sure, yeah.
Guys, be well.
But yeah, you guys can follow Steve on Twitter at SteveBHoop. We're Bannertown USA. I'm Jack Simone, NBA there, and Sam, you can wrap up the show.
Yeah, give Steve a follow. He's got 30,000. Add to the total, or almost 30,000. He's around there. I'm not exactly sure, but we appreciate him coming on again. Follow Bannertown. Follow Jack. You can follow me at Sam the France NBA, and that's our show for today. Bye.